I was speaking down in Montana right before Christmas, and I came across one observation. You guys have way more casinos down here than we have up there. In fact, every block I went through Great Falls, there was a casino. So, who in the room plays blackjack? There's that many casinos and none of you play blackjack. Oh, farming's a gamble, okay. So, further to my story, in blackjack they have what's called a cheat card. So when you're a really crappy gambler such as myself, you go down to Vegas, they give you a little card that says, if this hand is showing, here's your probability of winning, okay? So this entire presentation is gonna be how I'm gonna give you the cheat card to farming. As you said, you gamble enough at home. I am going to provide you a few tools and tasks of how you can win those matches. Okay, so if everything is under control, you are going too slow. Mario Andretti. My best story for this is that I am what they call a Hollywood farmer. I spend about a week actually farming. The rest of the time I sit in my desk in Saskatchewan and run numbers and do all that stuff. I don't actually have to get my hands dirty. So, view me how you want. But last fall, I got a call in August and said, because we were late seeding, we have a very busy fall. We need you here for a week. Now, they're not dumb enough to put me on a combine, so I get to drive a grain cart. Not that that's a bad thing, but the reason I was down there is that when I arrived, we had 9 combines, 2 grain carts, 6 semis, 3 sprayers, and 3 logistics crew all running at the same time. We like to call it organized chaos. Welcome to farming. Okay, so, love this slide. We've been using it for probably 10 years. Hold up your hand if you know what Blockbuster is. Ah, I love older crowds. Okay, this is the lifespan of Netflix and Blockbuster up until 2011. Old slide, but still love it. So, what I want to point out is right where that little arrow is. Netflix went to Blockbuster and they said, you know what, we want you to buy us. This was before Netflix was worth what it's worth today. And Blockbuster says, we don't need you. We have 7-day rentals, we got no late fees, look at how many stores we have, and you know what? Nobody's ever gonna watch a movie on a cell phone. It's not gonna happen. Now, how many of you have rented from Blockbuster lately? Okay. Why does this apply? In agriculture, right where that arrow is, that's where we are. Ag tech is a very monumental beast. In fact, it's the #1 industry in Silicon Valley right now. So we're not talking about Bayer, Monsanto, we're talking about Google and Microsoft, okay? Now the problem is, I've been showing this for a decade, and I use the exact same line every time. We're right where that arrow is. So for 10 years, I've been telling everybody we're right where that arrow is. We're not moving along the line. So I told you I'd show you the slide from before. There's the slide. And the best part is it comes out of Kansas, so it's not even Canadian data. So, as I said, automated guidance, built in 2000, took 11 years for half the industry to adopt. Sectional control, 2004, yield mapping, 94, yield monitor, 92, grid soil sampling, 94. I can go down the line. We are not at 50% adoption, which is why that slide of a Blockbuster is probably going to be in my presentation for the next 10 years after this. Okay, so why do we care? We're farmers, we grow grain, right? This is why we care. So I've got TPAP stats on the left. These come directly out of your own program down in Texas A&M. So when I ask the question about how many have a strategic plan, don't feel bad. This is straight out of the TPAP program. Duty statements, roles, responsibilities. Not many farms have them. Performance appraisals. Who here likes HR? Put your hand up. You're gonna love this presentation. Okay, SOPs, strategic operating procedures. I love this one because it gives me a good story. So, on farms, we've never had them. In every other industry, they are relevant everywhere. So, one of our SOPs is we tie the keys to the machines to the dipstick every night. And you've probably heard this story before because my partner tells it religiously. Reason we do it? We have an SOP of a checklist of morning maintenance. Any guess what's on that checklist? That's an SOP. Now, it may sound not as professional as every other industry, but that is a simple process that you can put in place that will force them to do maintenance. We do the same thing with setting GPS. We have one of our employees take a video. So if you're a new employee at HGV and you're going in to set a GPS line, you can go on your phone and play the video. Why do we have them? Because if you phone Christian or I every time you need to know how to set the GPS, I'm not going to be a happy individual. They're to make my job easier. Okay? 60% do budgets and track profits. I'm an accountant. I want to cry when I see that. 25% track key financial ratios, and 60% market without actually ever knowing their cost of production. So when I talk about Dr. Cole and selling to a profit, 60% of the farms don't even know what a profit is. So it's no wonder that we're not selling into a profit. Now, Canadian stats came out of Royal Bank in 2019, still relevant today, which is why I'm going to talk about HR today. Projected shortage of 123,000 workers in labor. Quarter of Canada's farmers will be 65 or older by 2025. By closing the labor gap and accelerating technology, we could be bigger than automobile and aerospace. We're just not closing that gap. Okay? Now, I listened to Peter Zehan in Manitoba last week. Anybody, show of hands, know who Peter Zehan is? Geopoliticist, writes books. I highly recommend. But don't do it before bed because he's really pessimistic and you're not going to sleep. So, his line is the demographics. We are about to run a labor shortage for the next 15 years. And what I mean by labor shortage is not just agriculture, every industry. So, if in agriculture we're already really bad at HR, what's it mean when there's no labor in any industry? How are we going to find workers, right? Now, you ask why? So, in 1965, the birth rate per woman was 5.1. Today, the birth rate is 1.6. Now, why is 1965 relevant? Sorry, as I made the retirement joke before, that is 58 years ago. The majority of the workforce is leaving. Majority of the workforce is retiring, so 5.1 kids are retiring, and we're replacing it with 1.7. Hence why we have a labor shortage. Now, the reason that 2040 it's going to get fixed is because that's when all the millennials will hit the job force. And I don't mean the millennials that are in the room today, because I'm technically a millennial, which I keep quiet. But the next set of millennials will hit the job force, which will bring our labor force back in. As well, technology. Anybody been to a McDonald's lately? Anybody realize you can order off a computer? Why is this happening? They knew this was coming before we did. Okay, so at HGV, every year we do a strategic plan. I preach what we do, and I'm very transparent. As you'll notice in my last presentation and this one, our whole goal is that we're not rugged individuals. I'm going to show you all the crap we do. Take it for what you want, but it's literally me just opening up the book. So for us, HR. Why? Because I just told you all the reasons we're worried. We run a 32,000 acre grain farm. We have 8 full-time and 5 part-time. HR is a big deal. Financial data-driven decisions. I'm an accountant. You knew finance was coming in here somewhere. Equipment utilization. I love this part. I hope you love it too, because this is the geek in me. Gross margin, and then debt structure. Okay, so we're going to go into HR first, because it is my passion. So this came out of Manitoba this year. As I said, we have labor shortages. This is what happens in agriculture when we have labor shortages in every industry. I don't want to be doom and gloom, but we are in trouble when it comes to hiring employees unless we get better. Now, why do we hate HR on farms? Hold up your hand if you're married. Hold up your hand if she's in the room with you. Oh, okay, this is good. Okay. So, when I talk communication, how's your communication with your wife? Not even a laugh, nothing? Okay, it's difficult enough, just the two of you. Now let's throw in an 8-day-old child. And I say 8 days because the first 7, they're really cute. They eat, they sleep, they poop, they don't do much. 8th day, they get a personality. How's the communication with an 8-day-old? How's the sleep? Okay, perfect. More complex. Let's go a step further. Let's say you got a 2-year-old and an 8-day-old. How's the communication? Ever had a 2-year-old go, what's that? What's that? What's that? Ever had a new employee go, what's that? What's that? What's that? Welcome to why HR is hated on farms. Complexity-wise, you add 4 people, you get 500% more complex. Communication is the reason HR breaks down. So, on HGV, we have core values and a legacy statement. Why? Because this is how we hire, fire, promote, and retain employees. If they don't live by those core values, they're not on our farm. Now, don't get me wrong, big companies have core values as well. I worked at MNP for 10 years up there. I have no idea what their core values are. 10 years I worked there, I couldn't tell you. Now, I won't call you out, but I have an employee with me today, my chauffeur. But if I asked her what those core values were before I showed this slide, she'd be able to tell you them. Every employee at HGV knows these core values because their promotions, their bonuses, and everything else that they get are based on them. Why is that important? Because we need our employees to live the same life we want, and we live, and we prove. This is how you have a good to great company. Okay. Is land a cost or an investment? Somebody yell it out. Perfect. Is equipment a cost or investment? Oh, I like that. The ones that say investment, I hate it. Are people a cost or an investment? Are you saying that because I'm standing up here? Because on 90% of farms, we go down, find the cheapest labor, and put them on the most expensive machine you can buy, especially in Saskatchewan. If we can get a miner that's on layoff, $20 an hour, put them on a $1.7 million drill, we love it. Cheap labor. Is there an issue with that? Yes. Okay, so recruitment and onboarding. When I started MNP, my first day, I got handed a policy manual. And I read it for 4 hours and I learned nothing and it really sucked. But would you believe that if you have an onboarding, such as a policy manual and a schedule for your first week at work, you are 60% or 66% better success rate of hiring. So, let's say your farm and my farm are trying to hire the same person. Comes to my farm, he's got a calendar of his first week. You're going to shadow this guy, you're going to sit with admin, get all your tech put on your phone, you're going to do this. Here's our policy manual. Here's our employee handbook. Read them. Okay. Simple steps, right? Goes to the next farm says, we're shoveling grain today, get in the bin. Right? Isn't that how we bring our first day clients on, or first day HR on? I have a 66% better rate of success hiring that person, just by having an employee handbook. So that's ours. It's actually online. Our employees get the website. It's a private website. They go on. It tells them the drug policy, the dress code, and their career, which I'll get into. Benchmarking. These are our benchmarks for Maverick, which is the consulting company I run, which is some of the largest farms in Western Canada. These are what we've come out to, and this applies to small farms, big farms, doesn't matter. If ownership is doing full-time labor, that's a full-time equivalent. 2,000 acres per full-time employee should work out to about 1.25, and by that, full-time employees about 2,080 hours. Now, don't get me wrong, if I looked around and all those guys who said they were a CEO and janitor, you're probably working 3,000, right? Now, the 16-hour day, this is the interesting one. We track this on our scorecards weekly because physiologically and psychologically, 16 hours is the breaking point of human. Means that as farmers, if you work 16-hour days, you're in a safety concern, your brain shuts off, and you have burnout. So if you want to burn out an employee, run 16-hour days. Now, how many of you guys start seeding at 5 a.m.? 6 a.m.? Oh, 7? Okay, no, you guys just start holding your hands up now. Okay? My point is that if I went through the majority of farms that don't run 24 hours, which is why we run 24 hours, there would be a lot of 16-hour days. For us, last year we had 32 16-hour days between all of our staff. The year before we had 65. We track it because we want the least amount of 16-hour days. So that's why we run 24 hours. We have 2 13-hour shifts. Our guys never work more than 13 hours a day during any season. Monthly hour limits, we track how many hours our employees get. Because what you'll find is if you have really good employees and then you have a really bad employee, who are you giving the work to? The really good one. You're going to work him like a horse, right? You're going to burn him out, he's going to leave. Is that beneficial to your farm? No. Okay, this is what we call the journeyman farmer. We created this for our farm. We're trying to get it pushed out into industry in Saskatchewan at least, or Western Canada. We want a program that creates the journeyman farmer. Just like a journeyman electrician, journeyman plumber, we want a qualified farmer. The reason we did this was because we have a debrief after harvest every year. And this year our debrief brought about one comment. One of our managers in the farm used to be a drill press. Says, you know what, I go into town and I go to the bar with all my buddies who are still on the rigs, and I'm a farm laborer. And it's a dirty word. People treat me like I'm less than them. Now, his pay is not less. His importance is not less. He's a manager, he runs people. But the term farm laborer sometime in the last couple decades became a dirty word. So on our farm, we don't have farm laborers. On our farm, you have a career. Now, this is just a pretty picture, but we give this to our employees because this shows them that when they come to work for us, we want them to be here 30 years. When I started at MNP, I started at $28,000 a year. I didn't want to sit at a desk for 28 grand a year, but I knew if I did, I would be manager, senior manager, partner, right? The goal is partner. So as a new accountant, 10 years from now, my goal was to make partner. When you start on a farm, what's your goal? Drive a drill? Go from a rock picker to a drill? Is that the 20-year plan? Because if that's the 20-year plan, I ain't staying. So, this is ours. So we have band one operators. We call them brand new guys. Rock pickers, harrows, any of the secondary equipment. Okay, that's where you start. Now, that's if you're not qualified. If we bring you in, you've driven drills and combines before, obviously, you're not coming in at that level. Just like if I was a CPA, I'm not coming in at a student level at a CA firm. I'm coming in as a CPA. So our level 2, primary operators. So they're running the drills, they're running the sprayers, they're running the combines. Third level, primary operators, but they're running a crew. So like I said, we have 7 or 8 combines in the field. I don't want to organize chaos. We literally have one guy in charge. You go here, you follow me. Okay? Next level is management. Now all of a sudden you're in charge of a team and you're responsible for a certain aspect of our farm. Whether it be dirt work projects, whether it be operations such as running the crews, whether it be the shop. We have a full-time mechanic that runs our shop team. Now, I realize the small farms in the room are going, this doesn't apply. You are correct. But if you're going to bring on even one employee, you still need to show them the path. Now it gets really interesting. So, I'm right here. I'm a junior partner. My last name is not Hebert, but I own a portion of the company, or partnership as it may be. How many here would be comfortable with a non-family member owning a portion of their business? I don't ever get hands for that, don't worry. Now the other trick is, our COO, Jeff Workentine, used to work for Viterra, ran 5 grain elevators, about 150 unionized workers. He's actually a senior partner. So we have 2 members that aren't last name Hebert, that have an equity share in this business. Is that a career path if I'd have started 10 years ago and I knew I could be an equity owner? Am I staying? Now, I'm not saying every farm has to do that, because there is dangers with that. But there is other ways of doing it, whether it's equity payables, whether it's performance bonuses. We have a profit share bonus. When we reach a certain dollar per acre profit, our employees get a percentage of their salary in bonus. Why? Back to my story about the combine settings. I want him at 1:30 in the afternoon to go, if I tell these other 6 combines, and we make an extra $20 an acre, I get a bonus. And I want every single one of my workers to know that. So even our office staff and our admin staff and our managers all get a profit share bonus to the company. This is how you make a career out of farming. This is our goal. Now, am I saying we're perfect at this? No. But this is what call it North Star. This is our scorecard, just so you don't think I'm just making stuff up and blowing smoke. We track our hours. Every week, the leadership team looks at this quickly, 30 seconds, and it tells us last year we were 8.7% under in the first 4 weeks of the year. Why? Because we didn't grow much grain, so you're not really hauling a lot of grain if you don't grow much. Okay? I didn't lie about the 16-hour days of the overtime. Oh, we pay overtime. Anything over 40-hour weeks, we pay overtime. Now, some aren't going to agree with that, because during seeding and harvest, that's a lot of hours. But guess what? Who hates you the most at seeding time? For me, it's the spouse of all of our employees. You want to know how you get over that? You have hourly wages, you have overtime, and the check they get at the end of May is really big. Sounds stupid, but we get less flack when the check is really big when the spouse is not around. That's why we pay hourly, that's why we pay overtime. The other one is Jeff has to run our staff very efficiently. If he has too much overtime and I make the budget, and he's over budget, that affects his performance bonus. Last slide for HR. Who here knows what Colby is? Nobody. Okay. Who here knows what a behavior analysis tool is? Perfect. So, before we hire anybody, we put them through a list of questions. It's called Colby. It's got 4 different categories, and it tells us what kind of behaviors they have. So essentially, how are they going to work well with our team? Because I want to know that before I hire someone. So, fact finder, follow through, quick start, implementer. Fact finder is, are they going to spend a lot of time going down some rabbit holes to find the answer, or are they just going to have a quick snap decision? Follow through. Are they actually going to do what they say, or are they going to take a long time to finish? Quick start. Are they going to come up with ideas, or are they a little slower coming around? And the last one is implementer. I'm a high implementer because everything I do, I have to build it first. If I don't see it, I don't believe it. Reason this is important is, so my business partner is a 9 quick start, which means that my email gets filled with, pardon my language, a whole bunch of shit that doesn't make sense. But for him, they're great ideas. We should do this, we should do this, we should do this. My job as an implementer is to go through it and pick out all of the things that actually make sense and implement them. We work well together because I'm a 3. I don't come up with ideas. Most of what I'm telling you today, as I told you, comes out of HGV. Weren't my ideas. Other one, ABC model. So we give this to our employees. They fill it out. What tasks of your job do you like? What tasks of your job are you okay with? And what tasks do you hate? Because if you want to keep an employee, they need to be doing 80% of their life something that they like. The other thing it does is it gets rid of assumptions. I have an office girl in Moosomin. She's the controller. She does all the bookkeeping. My assumption was she loves office work. So that's her job. She never leaves the office. Great. When she filled this out, she wanted to drive a tractor. Not a drill, because that's a lot of responsibility. But you know what? I like getting out of the office. I don't like sitting at a desk all my life. She now picks rock for us. One less employee I have to hire because she can do that role. I would have never put her in a tractor if I hadn't set this up. And it's been more than once that I've made assumptions. Who assumes that somebody likes shoveling grain here? I got 2 young guys on staff that love the exercise, and when they sit in a machine for 12 hours a day, they don't mind getting in a bin. Assumption. Okay, financial. We're going to be quick here because this is the boring part of the presentation. But when I said in the last presentation that we want to know our worst case scenario, this is why. Avoid the big losses. So I showed you the average of Western Canada in the last one. This is the top 25 and the bottom 25. In case you're wondering, this is called living off grandpa's equity. Because if you haven't made money for that long, the only way you're still farming is if you had a lot of equity. Hence the discussion I had before about equity and management. The costs have still inflated the same. Net income is different. Okay, quick run through. Working capital, I think we covered in the last one. Debt service. For the banks in the room, I think you'll like this one. Debt service is my most important ratio on our farm. Because it's the ratio that tells me if the bank's going to give me money or not. Okay, debt service is what are our debt payments versus what do we make in cash every year. Now, I've been informed during the break that North Dakota's got some oil revenue, so maybe a lot of you don't have a whole bunch of debt. But I'm still going to cover the ratios because farmers are 65, land's going to trade a lot. You guys may look at debt soon. Debt to equity. What is the value of your farm, aka land, versus how much debt you have? It's going to tell you if the bank actually has enough security. Return on equity. Now, this one gets a little foggy because my idea of return on equity is after you take real estate and investments out. How many of you calculate land rent to yourselves? Right? Majority don't. Why is that relevant? Well, because I said you're real estate investors. That's not farming. Farming is actually having to pay for the land. So, on our farm, we pay land rent out to the holdcos that own all the land. Investment. How many of you pay yourself a 5% return on your investment? Nobody. Why is that relevant? Well, if in Canada it's called a GIC, I think down here it's called a T-bill, but what's your guaranteed non-risk investment payback right now? 5%? 6%? Canada, I can invest in the bank right now 5% with no risk. But you're going to put your money into farming instead. You better get 5%. Otherwise, you're putting your money in the wrong spot. Okay, so I pull out the 5%, I pull out land rent, and this is just numbers, guys. You don't even have to write the check. But when you calculate your return on equity, I want it to be a return on equity from farming. Because before these last 2 commodity price jumps, let's call it 5 to 10 years ago, the average Canadian farm made $50 an acre, and the average Canadian rent was 75 to 100. Why is that relevant? Because I sat in meetings with husband and wife and told the husband he'd have made more money sitting on a beach in Jamaica renting his land out. And then the wife hits him. Okay, that's why it's relevant. Gross margin, I won't go into. You guys know what gross margin is. And cost of production. And the TPAP number, I think, sums that one up quite nicely. So, as I showed you our HR scorecard, these are the other metrics we follow. We look at cash balance. I told you we were overdrawn. I knew it was coming. Percentage old and new crop sold, sell into a profit, right? We had that discussion, so we track it every week. Now, this one's interesting. Repairs, maintenance, and supplies. Why do we track that? Well, because last year, we ordered a Seedmaster auger for one of our drills because it broke. $38,000, and it was the wrong one. Now, why is that relevant? As owners, I see those numbers. None of our team sees those numbers. Now their performance evaluations, they have a goal based on repairs and maintenance. So we look at it every week. The other reason we do it is we have toolkits on all of our equipment. Any guess what tool's missing from those toolkits? Come on, guys. If I have a set of wrenches, which one's missing? 9/16. So we audit those toolkits every year because every guy's got a tractor, every guy's got a combine. The reason we do that is 2 years ago, small tools on our farm was 142 grand. The number matters. Human resources we covered, and metrics, days of seeding. In North Dakota, who wants to tell me, what is your goal for seeding days? Ours is 21. What's yours? 3 weeks? Harvest. Ours is 40. How come I feel like I'm sharing before they share? Okay? I'm not saying you have to know it, I'm saying you should know it. Because in a 52-week year, does farming actually change? Or do we do the exact same thing every year? We do the exact same thing every year. The only thing that changes is when we start and when we finish. We put the seed in the ground, we pull the sprayers out, we pull the combines out, and then we haul the grain. I could literally franchise and put a process of how your life's going to be next year. All it changes is the weeks it happens. Oh. Back to this one. I won't go too much into this one. We already discussed this one. If you're a farmer, welcome to your life. Okay. Now the geek comes out. I love John Deere for one reason, and this is not a sales pitch for John Deere, but I love JD Link. I love that I can sit 3 hours away from the farm, 4 hours away from the farm, which is where I work, and go on my phone and watch the little combines go back and forth. Now, the reason I love it is that I get a lot of data out of it. So I love data analysis. I love pulling equipment data, seeding data, every kind of data, and I am in charge of putting it together into a usable format. You guys have a whole bunch of raw data on your farms. The problem is that nobody actually uses it for that cheat card, okay? So, why do I have those acres listed? Efficiencies and diminishing returns. That's good. So, we have multiples. The reason we have multiples is that what do farmers love? They love iron. I call it iron disease because I'm a consultant and I see it every year. We make a capital budget, I promise you will not hold up, okay? Now, when I have multiples, those are regulations for my capital budget. So, on our farm, we do 8,000 acres of drill, so 8,000 for an 80-foot drill. So we have 32,000 acres, we have 4 drills. 12,000 acres of sprayer, and 4,000 acres of combine. Now, don't get me wrong, we tried to go to X9s, but none of them got delivered. When we do, it'll be 6,000 a combine. So why do we have that? So we're 32,000 acres right now, and if Christian phones me tomorrow and says we're going to 34, do they get to buy any machinery? Nope. Well, 34,000, we just added 2,000 acres. That's really running lean. Yep. But unless you want to inflate my budget and my numbers, those are your multiples. It's the only reason we have them. We have them because it keeps everybody honest. So for us, before the combine swap, we had to grow 4,000 acres for me to allow a new piece of equipment. And I say allow, I'm not the number one owner, but I am the one that holds the budget. Okay, machinery utilization. So, as I said before, we prototype a lot of equipment for John Deere, and part of our agreement is that I give them our data, they give us theirs. So, on the left is our sprayer, on the right is at the time, I want to say 4940, I think was the number, the biggest John Deere sprayer they had in Western Canada. Would it scare anybody to know that you pay $1 million for a sprayer and you utilize the nozzles on 35% of the time? The other 65% of the time that thing's running, it's either being filled or sitting idle. Why does this matter? Because the first year we did this, we were actually 34. And if you know my business partner, being average is not part of the equation. So that's the second year. 54. How'd we do it? I promise you we didn't buy another sprayer. Number one, and the most important, we timed our fills. We used to take 21 minutes to fill. We got it down to 7. Number one reason it got down to 7 is A, we made it a game. We literally put our guys up against each other to see who could fill the fastest. B, we started stopwatches so they actually tracked it. And C, we put a batch fill on the spray trailer. That's all we did. So if you want to do the cost of what it cost us to do that, please do it. It was next to nothing. But by improving 20%, and I know this isn't true numbers, but if you take $1 million sprayer, 20% of $1 million sprayer, we're now using 200 grand more of that sprayer than the average in Western Canada. Why is that relevant? Because I said 12,000 acres of sprayer, and I'm sure guys in the room went, not a chance. That's how we do it. We drive the sprayer better than the average. Okay. And this is all data that I could pull off anybody's combine in the room, most likely. So 2 years ago, we went from, actually 1 year ago, no, 2 years, we went from 7 to 8 combines. They said, we need a third grain cart. Why? We're not keeping up. Okay, pulled the data. See that little box that says idle full there? That's, if your combine's sitting idle and it's full, what's that mean? Grain cart's not keeping up. $4,900. That's what it cost us. What's a new grain cart worth? 300? Getting there? So did they get a new grain cart? No, they didn't. Now, if I didn't have these numbers, would they have bought a new grain cart? 100% they would have. From an operational standpoint, they felt they were falling behind and it was costing us money. From a data cheat card standpoint, nope. The other one I found interesting, so this is all our primary equipment, combine sprayers, tractors. We spend 115 grand driving from field to field every year. Makes me a little bit sick. Now, the reason that's relevant is we had the chance to buy land that was about 100-ish clicks from the main farmyard. Price of the land was good. Could have done it. But in our operation, it's not just about the price of the land, it's about what's it going to cost us and can we make money. The price of the land made sense to buy from a real estate perspective. From an operations perspective, when you run the kilometers, we'd have to drive that equipment back and forth. Without the commodity prices where they are, it didn't make sense. So, instead of using our gut and emotion, because farmers love land, we did not buy land because from an operational standpoint, it was not going to make us money. This is what data analysis does for me. Okay, as I said, the reason I love JD Link is I can sit on my couch. This was exactly what I was doing. Sitting on my couch, going through my phone, pulling out numbers. And I realized something that I didn't know before. Who here uses John Deere equipment? Anybody? Funny question. Who here knows what Harvest Smart is? It's that little funky button that you press and the combine drives itself. It's got about 1,000 sensors in the combine that drive best based on grain loss, capacity, horsepower, all that cool stuff. Why is that important? It's because we trialed it for 3 years before John Deere came out with it, and we put it up against our best drivers. 20% better. That's what the combine, the actual trend came out to. That can drive itself 20% more efficient than we could. Okay, so we have the number. We've trialed it. Other interesting part is that I found out that I could actually find which combine driver hits the button. I actually know how many acres and hours the guys use it and the guys don't use it. Okay? So, big story, why is this relevant? 2019, we call it the harvest from hell. We had 800 acres of barley that ended up under the snow. Okay? So, 800 acres, you do the math on what we lost on that over the winter. It's enough. Plus, as I said, we tried combining December 23rd. It was a nightmare. Reason that's relevant is, based on the 20% efficiency, if the guys had hit the flipping button, we'd have done another 1,572 acres. And we left 800 acres of barley in the field. So do you think at performance review time, because each of our guys runs their own combine, you think there was a conversation? This is what ag tech does. This is what data does. So we also started using Verge a few years ago. We've now flipped over to the John Deere equivalent of it, but Verge is about that A-B line that's perfect, right? You always see those pictures of guys finishing up harvest and they got half a header width and they're coming down and it's the last pass. The whole technology here is so that when you finish a field, you got a 30-foot pass, because that's the optimization, no wasted passes. Sounds far-fetched, but through the data analysis, our total combine cost for the year in 2000, I think this is 19, was $486,000. That's what it cost us to run all of our machines. We were 22,500 acres at the time. We did the first pass analysis. We let them take one of our fields and they compared it to how we drove it the year before versus how they told us to drive it. So just setting an A-B line, it was 8.89% more economical to use their lines. We would drive 4 miles less using their guidance. Now, reason that's interesting is that you extrapolate that across the entire farm, that is 1,800 acres quicker. Now let's add it to the 1,572 from the last slide. So the year we left 800 acres of barley out in the field, if we'd have used the technology and trusted the button, we'd have done 3,372 more acres. Now, just to tie it back, what was our multiple on combines? 4,000. Through small 2 technologies, I almost eliminate a combine. What's a combine worth? $1 million. Verge, I don't know at the time. Let's call it 20 grand, 30 grand maybe for the subscription. The button in the combine's free because we already paid for it. Technology could actually save us $1 million. Okay. Now, I am going to start this by saying I am not an agronomist. When I used to farm, agronomy and mechanics were my 2 worst. That's why I'm up here talking about business. Okay? But what that does for me is that when my business partners tell me something, I'm too naive not to believe it. So, we use crop intelligence up there. So much like your weather stations, these are moisture probes. We got about 25 of them across the farm. They go down and they tell us how much moisture is in the ground for the crop during the growing season. This year, they also estimate yield. 4. Go right to 4. And one of my slides, I'll explain why we go to 4. So, we go to 4, and this year, it said if we got 100% of rainfall, which is the 30-year average for that time period, we could grow 80 bushel canola if we fertilized for it. Now, the problem is to fertilize for 80 bushel canola, we know that 1 bushel canola takes 3 pounds of nitrogen. 80 bushel would be 240 pounds of nitrogen. Now, we also know that there's some organic, there's some carryover, all that other nice stuff. Now, to get 80 bushel, we would need 190 pounds of N. Who here has ever put 190 pounds of N on their field? Arm up. Yeah, I didn't expect. Gonna make you smile for this one? Okay, so 190 pounds of N. As we've just concluded, nobody would ever do it, right? I wouldn't do it. That year, we used a little bit of Farmer's Edge to approve our trials. Let's call it a test. Would you believe that the best uptake for canola response is between 180 and 240 pounds of N? So everybody in the room said you're crazy at 190 pounds of N. I'm telling you right now that the best uptake for canola is between 180 and 240. The quote I always use is, you don't know what you don't know. Now, to go to why we have 4-foot moisture probes, is because I have seen wheat roots wick at the 4-foot level. They've actually hit the probe. So that means your wheat plant can actually go down 4 feet. The reason that's important, the first year we started using crop intelligence, it was dry. Dry. So what do farmers do? We went, got our shovel, dug, no moisture, no subsoil moisture, right? Now we top dress, so we have dual applications on the farm. The part that nobody else knew is that our moisture probe said that we had 11 inches of moisture. It just wasn't in those top 2 inches. So we go out and we top dress every acre of wheat. And the funny story was, our COO was in at a baseball game of his kids, and one of the neighbors comes up and he says, you know what, I think your boss has lost it. What do you mean? Christian has been top dressing for the last 3 days. This is the driest we've ever been. He's an idiot. Perfect. Love a challenge. Why is that relevant? Because with that 11 inches of moisture underneath and the probability of a rain shower, because on a 30-year average, there was a probability we were going to get a shower. And as your weather guy said, it's never guaranteed, it's not linear, but we work in probabilities. Cheat card. So what did this cheat card get us? It got us a protein premium. It got us a gross return of $183 an acre. So while every other farm didn't top dress, our moisture probe, our cheat card, told us there was 11 inches of moisture there and the probability of getting rain was high enough that we had a net return of 7-1 on that top dress. Would we have done it otherwise? Nope. But as I said, we look at cheat cards. Okay, structure and leverage. Now this one might not be as relevant because obviously, as I had a conversation in the break, a lot might not have a whole bunch of leverage. I'm going to tell you right now, our farm is leveraged to the hilt. Because I gave you the ROI explanation before, interest at 6% doesn't scare me because return on equity is at 25. Makes sense. If I could guarantee you an investment for 10 grand, if you put a check for 1,000 in today and there was no risk, would you do it? Yes. Now, lots in the crowd are going to say, you just said there's no risk in farming. No, I didn't. What I meant was between insurance programs that we have in Canada, and I'm not sure what yours are here, so it may be slightly different, I can actually guarantee a profit next year because prices are that good. Okay? So, from a no risk, if I can guarantee a profit, is there risk? Nope. So why do we talk about debt structure and leverage? So, on our farm, the reason we leverage out is, as I said, we like to expand. So we have lines of credit opened up. We have all of our land mortgaged already, ready for the next opportunity. We are buyers. I'm still a buyer. How we do this is that we have our operating credit that's backed by all of our inventory. We have our equipment backed by our equipment, our buildings backed by our buildings, and our land backed by our land. The reason we do it that way is because most farms put all their debt into one little pot and back it with land. Well, who here believes that their equipment's worth more today than it was a year ago? We have 9% inflation. Yes, it is. In fact, I would argue that on most of your financial statements, if your accountant tries to put amortization, I would say, my equipment didn't amortize this year. It actually went up in value. Why is that relevant? Because on our farm, with the amount of combines that I've listed here and everything else, it's a very large number of equity in our equipment. And if we didn't utilize that, it would actually lower our land possibilities. Okay? It's aggressive farming, but as I said with the insurance programs, that's how we play it. Okay, why is security maximization important? Now, this is a Saskatchewan graph. You tell me if North Dakota is the same, but this is 17, and I can promise you it would be off the slide by now. Our land has gone up by about $1,000 an acre over the last 6 months in Saskatchewan. So, why does security maximization matter? Because it costs us $1,000 more per acre to buy the same land that we could have bought 6 months ago. The other one is, that's what we provide our bank. The reason we do it, because I need a really good relationship with my bank. Now, this slide, sometimes I piss some smaller farms off with this, but I want you to remember something. The average farm size 6 decades ago was quarter, 2 quarters. Have you actually sat down and realized how many farmsteads you guys own? 3,000 acre farm could own 10 farmsteads. It is feasibly possible. For us, we own 32. Reason we know that number is that we do respect where agriculture came from. So we respect all the farms that we have bought since then. But remember, all of you, consolidation has happened. You all own more than just one farm. And this will be my last slide for this one. I like this slide because a lot of what I say here, some people will roll their eyes. Some people will say, not for me. Some are writing stuff down, which I love to see. But what you're going to know is that the last thing myself or my business partner or our farm wants to do is fit in. Everything we do box the norms, hence why I'm up here telling you about it. That's all I got. But I think I'm quick enough I could probably do questions this time. Can I? We're good? Questions? Oh, come on, guys. Fire away. So we do our own floating and obviously have dual multiple applications between the drill. And as I said, the 8,000 acres per drill, we do that because we have the floater. Obviously, we don't put as much through the drill set. We don't have our own fertilizer shed, but we do have a whole bunch of storage, and we are liquid and granular. So our N is all liquid. We run Alpine. So we have a lot of liquid storage tanks, and then we have enough granular storage to hold it. As I was saying in the break to one of the guys, our hedging strategy going forward, I think, is going to be to store it in the ground. So what I mean by that is sulfur, potash, and phos, you can actually put in the ground for multiple years, right? So when it's cheap, which is not right now, although it has softened, but it's not right now, we're actually this year pulling back all of our sulfur and potash because we've floated it for the last 3 years. So our hedging strategy is going to be a longer term nutrient plan, and to put it down when it's cheap and feasible and good for the margin, and then to amortize it over the years that it's high. Answer your question? Good. Perfect. So we were 14,000 acres 4 years ago. We're 32,000 this year and we'll be 34,000 next year, and we haven't bought a quarter. So why rent? Right now, if I run quarters of land up in Saskatchewan at the current interest rate, it comes out to about $425 an acre principal and interest. Okay? Our rent in that same area is between 75 and 120. From a cash flow perspective, the interest costs on the purchase would actually be more than our rental rates. So for us, right now, I will rent as much as I can find. Now, is that a feasible long-term plan? Yes and no. The reason I say yes and no is that most of our rental contracts are 10 years. Now, why is that important? Because the banks in the room will probably attest, short-term rental contracts are risk to them. You go out and let's say we took a 4,000 acre rental, we got to buy another combine, right? Well, that's another $1 million investment that if that rent goes away tomorrow and they pull the land back, all of a sudden I'm over-equipped. 10-year rental agreement, I got 10 years of runway. So I can build a fleet, and if I have to get rid of a fleet, I can get rid of a fleet in that same time period. So for us, we are renters, but to tell you the truth, at 6.5%, I'm still a buyer too. Just got to remember, as I said, we are real estate owners and we are farmers. From an operation standpoint, does $425 an acre payments make sense? Anybody here say yes? No. Now, from a real estate perspective, land in Saskatchewan compared to the other provinces is still low. We were actually lagging behind Alberta and Manitoba quite a bit. So from a real estate perspective, if I'm buying on spec, assuming it's going up, I'm still a buyer. It's just you got to balance that real estate versus farm, because right now the farm's going to have to cash flow $425 an acre, but from a real estate perspective, it makes sense. The other part of that is we've had rent in Saskatchewan, and don't get me wrong, Coffee Row loves this. There was a quarter in Saskatchewan that got rented for $220 cash rent at an auction about 3 weeks ago. Now, this is not going to be a popular view, so you can hate me after I say this, but for that area, I would still rent it. So the guy that gave it up, I actually know his gross margins. He used to be a consulting client. With these commodity prices, $225, he's probably making $200 an acre on that land still. Now, would I sign a 10-year agreement at $225? No. Would I sign a 2-year agreement with prices where they are today? Yeah. I'll make $400 an acre over 2 years. I'm okay with that. Now, the problem is that as farmers, who here, hold your hand up, who's in love with their land? There we go. Welcome to the problem in agriculture. We are in love with our land. Would it be unheard of to take on a 2-year opportunity and give it back? Oh yeah, that's going to be hard on your psyche, I'm not lying. But from a business perspective, which is what I've been talking about for 2 hours, does it make sense? Yes, it does. That's the trade-off. You have to get used to the emotion versus business. Answer your question? Yeah. Yeah, so on rental, we got really competitive about 2 years ago because it's a competitive market. And by competitive, I don't mean we paid more. I mean we got creative. I'm a CPA, Christian's a CPA, we like to get really creative. So our longer term rentals are what we call a gross margin rent with a floor and a ceiling. So in our area, we have a $50 floor, let's call it, and we have a $100 ceiling. The $50 gets paid out monthly to our renters, and in November, when we calculate what our gross margin was across the farm on those numbers, on their acres, they will get a top-up. Now, the last 2 years have been pretty good. With commodity prices where they are, they're going to get 100. But do I care that they get 100 when we made what we made? No. But what it does is they do play in some of our risk, right? So in a bad year, hence commodity prices come down and we signed a 10-year agreement. Will that come down to the 50, 60 range? Probably. But the 100 is higher than anybody else is getting in that area right now. So in a good year, they're playing the upside as well. The other thing we do, and we started doing this about 2 years ago, we do what's called a landlord guarantee. So when we start renting your land, we do soil tests across our entire farm. It's what we do. But on the new rented land, we'll take a soil test and we'll give them the report. At the end of the rental agreement, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it might be, we do the same thing. And we do 4-acre grid sampling. So like we do a lot of testing. When they get that report back, if the nutrients are less than what we had when we started farming it, we pay them $5 to $10 an acre. Just cut them a check. Why? Because what are renters most worried about? They're worried about you pillaging their land. So how do we get rid of that? I'll show you that I farm it like I farm every other quarter I have. That's how we keep our landlords. Make sense? We have time, or we still got? Oh, I got lots of time. Pardon? Go further, because I'm not an agronomist. From a weed perspective, and again, this answer may not even be close to what you want, but for us, and I had the conversation, so you guys, as I understand it with your crop insurance, can grow canola every 3 years? Is that what it is? Am I right or wrong? Yeah? Up there, we're canola, snow canola. So we want to talk weeds or disease or whatever we want to talk, that is welcome to Saskatchewan. But we are starting to find sclerotinia and everything else. So on our farm, we used to be 5 different crops. We used to be canola, wheat, barley, fall rye, and a little bit of pulse. Let's call it peas. Lately, we've gone down to canola, wheat, barley for one reason. optimization of equipment. When we have to stretch, which until we got to 32,000 and I allowed them another combine and another drill, we were stretched. It's much easier logistically to grow 3 crops than it is to grow 5. And to tell you the truth, until the last 2 years, barley's been our #1 crop, not canola. So for us, we're on a 3-year rotation, just like you guys are forced to. We're just not forced to. But for us, unlike some of the other areas of Saskatchewan, canola is not our top cash crop. It will be last year and this year, but on most years, barley is actually our top crop. Yeah, primarily malt and yield. Now the reason I can almost guarantee malt is because we're probably the largest barley producer in that area. So we got a little bit of, let's call it, size power over some of the elevators, which it's volume, right? Anything else? So we, up until 3 years ago, if you'd have driven into Hebert Grain Ventures yard, you'd have thought it was a 2,000 acre farm. And I'm not kidding. Like when I came over, and that was probably the least underwhelming thing. Now, in 2020 or I think 2020, we had 132 grain bags in the field. You want to piss off employees? That's the #1 way to do it. So, since then we have built a grain facility, let's call it. I'm not gonna joke around with you guys. It's not just a bin yard, it's a grain facility. So storage-wise, last year I think we were down to about 30 grain bags. And honestly, the reason was it's so far from the yard, some of our land, that from an efficiency standpoint, it was easier just to bag it. Now, we've taken on land. We are about 100 kilometers tip to tip. And the one problem we have is that the farmyard is in one of the tips. So we are 100 clicks at the most. So now we're looking at putting up another bin yard in the far corner, because honestly, we don't plot farm because we don't believe in it, because we like our employees culture-wise to stay together. But we are technically a plot farm. We have a north and a south portion. The north portion, we got sick of hauling grain back to the dryer and then an hour back to the nearest town that was only 2 clicks from the original field. That's a pain in the ass. Answer? Other than the -40 I left in yesterday, I'm going to go no. Yeah. I would say, so the farm right now is in Moosomin. So, I mean, we're only an hour and a half north of here. So, I mean, from that perspective, and don't get me wrong, I'm filibustering because I don't actually have the answer for you, but I don't see it being a massive climate shift and moisture shift. We were the same as you guys. We didn't get in the field till after May long weekend last year, and the year before we started seeding on April 14th. So that 16-hour day conversation that I had with you, that's why. When you're 3.5 weeks behind, it gets a little scary. So, do you want the right answer or my answer? Yeah. The right answer is that if land prices were to ever soften, especially in Western Canada, you would see a lot of farms go down. And I don't like saying that. But the thing I have going for us in Saskatchewan, as I said, is we are still underpriced at the moment. So for them to soften, they'll be the last ones to feel it. But I reappraise our farm every single year. The reason I do it is that if we own 10,000 acres and it went up $1,000 an acre last year, that's a lot of equity I just opened up. So our expansion plans, yes, as I told you, we run our operating line tight, we run our equipment buildings maximized right out, and we run our land as far out as we can. And in fact, with the interest rates where they are, if from a working capital standpoint, I don't want to pay $425 an acre, we'll do interest only on half. The reason I do it, not smart, it's expensive, don't get me wrong guys, but we want the land. But the other portion is, in our eyes, I never plan on paying off the land. In our eyes as an operation, if we can continue doing what we're doing and making the return that we're making, and that's not just in the good years, we've had good returns in the bad years, why would I ever pay off the land? I might as well put the cash back into operations. So the banks up there on land, it'll be 80%. The land will go to 80% on the leverage up there. How aggressive do you want to get? So debt to equity, the banks, depending on which bank you use, the nationals up there, they'll let you go 1-to-1. So they'll put as much risk as you have in there. Now, the funny part is if you're really big and you can show really good profits, they get a little riskier. I do have farms that would be 2-to-1, which means that they have twice as much debt as they have equity in the farm. Not the smartest thing, and the line I always use with my clients is that the banks will give you a rope. My job as CFO is to make sure you don't hang yourself with it. Okay? Good answer? Bad answer? Close your ears, guys. You don't want to hear this? No. You're getting a lot of phone calls tomorrow now. Anything else? What he's saying nicely is, what do you do with millennials that have never had to work hard? Now, don't take it to heart, guys. We're not being rude. Farming over the last generation has been really good, guys. I'm not going to lie. And I've had this conversation with guys during the break, is that when I asked who's seen 20% rates, none of the young guys put their hands up, right? When I asked who's seen, when I started farming, I could rent for property taxes. That's how bad farming was. So, the ones who haven't seen it and don't know the pressure that could be coming, how do you get them motivated? My answer to you, incentivize what they want. So, what do we know about the millennial generation? And I'm talking about myself here too, although I'm not quite the same as them, but does wage matter? What matters? And? Passion. Okay. So if time and passion are what the new employees want, does it matter what you pay them? Nope. So as HR professionals, which all of you are now after watching this, how are you going to get those people to work? You're going to set up a work-life balance that works for them, and that sounds stupid because nobody in this room had that work-life balance, right? But they're not you. And this is the cards you get dealt. Welcome to HR. So we got a work-life balance we got to worry about, which means they probably want to be home to kiss their kids goodnight. They don't want to be up at 4:30 in the morning. We're going to have to implement shifts, and we're going to have to watch their hours, right? Passion. How do you give them passion? I'm going to go back to my career objective. If all I know is I'm going to drive a rock picker for the next 5 years, how passionate am I? Now, that's for an employee. Now, if it's your son, how about you bring him into some of your bank meetings? Or you bring him along when you're talking to the agronomist. Why? Because they're not going to have passion if all they do is get in a machine and drive for 14 hours. What they're going to have passion is seeing dad sit in a meeting and negotiate a tractor deal. Does it matter that they're there? No. Are they going to add anything to it? Probably not. Are you getting them involved in being ownership and moving up the realm? 100%. That's what the new generation wants. They want a passion. Now, you're going to have to fight a whole bunch of other forces. I'm not kidding. Hence why my workforce is all older. But those are my starting points, is that find out what the next generation wants, and that's how you build your HR policies. If you want me to sit here and say that I think we'll all be obsolete in 10 years because they're self-driving, not a chance. Sorry, guys. The machinery is getting bigger, not smaller, and I realize that you see the DOT program and all those ones. Who here believes that that's going to be feasible in 10 years? Because I don't. So ag tech, I do believe, as I've shown on the efficiency side, will lower as well. In one of my presentations, I was laughing. I have a slide from John Deere that shows their first combine they sold versus the X9. The horsepower differences and everything else. The difference was 300 acres per day versus 30. So from an HR perspective, I think ag tech on machinery and optimization will improve, which will require less employees. But do I think we're going to have the McDonald's where you can order on the sign and not need an employee? No, we're not getting there. And the other thing it'll do is it'll force you to use third party. How many people have tried fixing a brand new X9 combine? You can't do it. So, are we going to need a mechanic on staff for the rest of our lives? Probably not if it continues going the way it's going. Anything else? And don't get me wrong, guys, I stand up here confident and give you these answers. I could be full of shit. We good?